Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to our Beyond the Celebrations live event today. With me, I have one of our curriculum and instruction team members, Melissa Perez. She is our cultural and linguistics development specialist. I also have our illustrious leader, our executive director of K through 12 curriculum instruction, Miss Chanel Sidbury. And another member of our CNI team today who's joining us is Miss Heidi Perez. Heidi is our 6 through 12 literacy integration specialist and will be playing a critical role in interviewing our very special featured guests today. Once again, I welcome everybody, and I'm going to pass it over to Melissa to talk about our DPS Celebrates for June and July.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to have everyone here. So excited about our featured guest today. So I would like to share with you a little bit about DPS Celebrates and our website features. At celebrate.dpsnc.net, every month we add new resources for teachers and students and family members to be able to use. In addition, we have a monthly calendar of events that we are celebrating. We also have the website available in English and in Spanish. We have social media posts and flyers that we share. We also have an e-library to share with our students that have books related to the monthly celebrations that we have. In addition, we have some Zoom backgrounds and Bitmoji classrooms available for use for teachers and students. And all of the celebrations and resources that we provide are in response to our DPS population. We also highlight various things for awareness as well that are culturally responsive according to our DPS strategic plan. So we're going to look forward at celebrate.dpsnc.net to the current month of coming in summer, June and July. So for June, we have LGBTQ celebration month. We have Juneteenth. We also have Multiracial Heritage Week as well. Our character trait for the months of June and July is citizenship. We also have July 4th, U.S. Independence Day. We also have our summer learning, our summer camp opportunity that DPS is providing for students this year, which we are super excited about. We have graduation coming up for all of our seniors in DPS. And another opportunity that for summer learning and exploration is Explore Durham, and we'll talk about that a little bit later today in the program. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to our Executive Director, Ms. Chanel Sidbury.
Thank you, Melissa. So why is it that Durham Public Schools is doing this beyond the celebrations and beyond 28? This slide gives you a little bit of background about the demographics of Durham Public Schools. So if you see here mathematically, Durham Public Schools is over 80% students of color. So we have a diverse grouping of our students and our families, and it's very important that our families and our students see themselves in the instructional resources that we share, the opportunities that we provide, and also the celebrations that we uplift. It's not good enough for us in Durham Public Schools that we only celebrate in February, or we only celebrate the Spanish heritage in that particular month. We want to uplift the otherwise historically marginalized populations on a routine basis so that our families know that we care, so that our students know that they can. And we want to also make sure that we strive to continue to have inclusive practices in everything that we do in Durham Public Schools. Just to highlight a couple of the things that we are doing, in addition to DPS Celebrates, we are also doing Decolonize the Curriculum, which is led by Ms. Heidi Perez, as well as our literacy department in curriculum and instruction. We have in the Office of Equity Affairs multiple programs that outreach in particular to students of color, as well as a equity board policy that will help us govern ourselves with leading with the end in mind and making sure that the marginalized groups that have been historically marginalized are not in the practices and the strategies that we bring forth in Durham Public Schools. So this work is important to us on a daily basis. We are making sure that we strive for equity and also equality. So I am going to turn it over to the next speaker, which is going to be Kelly, who is going to introduce to you our special guest today that is going to talk about the celebration of 50 years of decolonization, of desegregation in Durham Public Schools. Kelly?
Thanks, Chanel. Yes, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the desegregation of Durham schools. And this is all thanks to our special guests that are going to be joining us today. Although our official celebration is next week, we're using this opportunity today to celebrate it. So our featured guests are Diane Bloom, Bill Riddick, and Osha Gray Davidson. Now, if you had the chance earlier in February and March to watch the Best of Enemies movie, Osha Gray Davidson is actually the brains behind the book, which inspired the movie. So we're really excited to have all of these guests with us today. And I'm going to toss it over to Heidi. Heidi is going to lead our discussions with our very special guests. And I want to thank all of you for joining us virtually here in Durham today. I know you all have been here in person because I've met you all in person, but it is great to have you joining us virtually as well. And Heidi, I'll let you go ahead and take off.
Thank you, Kelly. So I'm thrilled to welcome our special guest today. For me, this is a very, it's a very moving experience because the work of these three guests are actually what led me to choose Durham for my family and choose Durham to raise my daughter. I do want to remind folks that are watching this live stream or the recording of it, because it'll be available on the Durham Public Schools YouTube channel, to please drop some questions in the chat for our special guests or our curriculum and instruction team, and we will try and get to them and answer them. And I want you to tag it with hashtag DPS Celebrates for a chance to win a copy of Mr. Davidson's book, The Best of Enemies. We have a bunch of copies of those to give away to folks who comment and ask questions. And just recently, just a few minutes ago, Ms. Bloom also offered 5 copies of her documentary film, An Unlikely Friendship, and we'll be able to give those away too. So make sure you're using that chat in, excuse me, in the YouTube channel, and we'll give away some great Durham history. And so I'm going to start by welcoming Mr. Osha Gray Davidson, who is the author of the book, Ms. Diane Bloom, who is a researcher and documentary filmmaker, and she created the documentary An Unlikely Friendship, which we'll talk a little bit about today. And Mr. Bill Riddick, he's our living history today. Mr. Bill Riddick actually helped to facilitate the Charrette Process that led to the desegregation of Durham schools. So I'm going to start with Mr. Riddick today. Your meaningful work with the people of Durham helped desegregate Durham schools. So I want you to tell our community, tell us about your work in setting up and facilitating the Charrette Process here in Durham during that desegregation period.
It was an interesting time, and I'm proud to be part of that history. It was obvious to me that there were issues in Durham that just needed to be settled. And when Durham was chosen, and myself and some other people made that choice, it was a real challenge. The first thing we did was to set up a steering committee. That steering committee included individuals who were leaders in obvious for certain situations, whether it was political, whether it was business. And we put together, I believe we started with 12 people. And this process lasted about 6 weeks. At the end of this process, of getting all this done, you choose the two co-leaders of the charrette. And that's where the story really starts, in the sense of why we all are still here. I went to see CP and Ann individually, and then tried to mix them together, which was a big mistake at that time. But it got to be well. And when we started the charrette, the first day was the hardest work day I have had in my life. And I've been here a long time, but I cannot, have anything that has happened in my work career that was as tough as that first day. And I really left that first day saying, no, I don't need to do this. I could call this thing off now, and we could be finished with this, and I can go somewhere else. But then I didn't choose to do that. The whole problem initially was my own problem. And I hate to say this, I really didn't like either one of those folks. I mean, they were just unreasonable. And the first thing that I had to do, and I think maybe made this whole thing successful, was to get the biases out of my eyes. And I came home that night and talked to my wife, and she said, well, why are you dealing with this whole thing? You change, they might change. And I didn't like that, but after I thought about it, she was really on target. And I went back the next day trying to be the example of what I thought they should be. And I think that changed the whole tone to some extent of the charrette.
Wow, that's a powerful message, Mr. Riddick. A powerful message. Thank you. We're going to move on. I'm going to ask Ms. Bloom the next question. Ms. Bloom, your documentary, An Unlikely Friendship, is just, it's just a touching story, really. And it focuses on the relationship that developed between CP Ellis and Ann Atwater. So what made you decide to make a documentary about how that friendship developed?
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. How I decided was I had a group of friends over to my house to see a different documentary that I made on a much later topic called Squirrel Wars. And it was on local cable TV. And one of the people that came was Stephen Hawthorne, a social worker in Durham. And he brought OSHA's book, The Best of Enemies. And he said, you should read this book because maybe your next documentary could be the story about these two people. And he said it's an amazing story about a Ku Klux Klan leader and a Black woman civil rights activist that hated each other, but after 10 days of working together, became lifelong friends. And I was really, so I read the book and I thought, this is an amazing story. And I was particularly drawn to the subject of change, people changing, because I felt like I was definitely cynical that people could change and maintain that change. And here were two people that changed and maintained it over a lifetime. And so I really wanted to talk to them more, making the documentary to find out, how this could have happened in 10 days, as opposed to like many years of therapy, just 10 days. So that was what originally drew me to it. And I guess I came to the conclusion, I was much more optimistic about change because I felt like when they came to actually know each other as people instead of stereotypes, they found out how much more alike they were than different. And that's, that's, we would all find that if we were, in a room with somebody for 10 days, probably.
Definitely. I think so too. And So thank you, Ms. Bloom. I'm going to move on and ask Mr. Davidson. Your book, The Best of Enemies, is really just a masterfully told history of not just the desegregation of Durham public or Durham schools, but of the people and the places where it happened. When we read this book as a team a few years ago, when the film was coming out, I'm a history geek. And when I dug through this book and saw that it wasn't just the single story, it was the stories of the people and the places where all of this happened as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what compelled you to write this book and some of the research that went into it?
Sure. Thank you, Heidi. And let me just say, it's an honor to be sharing this screen with Bill Riddick, a giant in not just in Durham's history, but in now that the story has been told through Diane's documentary and through play by Mark St. Germain and the movie by Robin Bissell. It's known throughout the nation, and I hear from people around the world who have seen it. So, and it's all down to Bill, who made this happen. So, back to the question that you asked me, the same thing that drew Diane drew me to the story originally, which was, what a bizarre story. A Klansman and a Black woman who was a community organizer becoming friends. But the book that I wrote had to change as I got to know both of them and started digging more into the history. It wasn't really just a story about these two individuals. What interested me was the context. The facts and stories are nothing without context. And people, one criticism of the book was that, oh my gosh, it had so much history in it. And okay, you know, not every history isn't everybody's thing, but it wasn't history that interested me really so much as context. And they're kind of interchangeable worlds, but what becomes the reason that history is important is because it provides context for today and for tomorrow. And what really interested me too was CP. How did he buy into this myth of white supremacy to such an extent? Where did that come from? I mean, I did understand after a while of talking with Anne and him about how he left the Klan, but how did he buy into it? What created this idea of white supremacy, and how deep did it go? And for CP, what holes in himself, in his own psyche, did white supremacy fill? He was poor. He was he was discriminated against, not in the same way that Black people were, but the elite people in Durham really looked at him with complete disrespect. And one thing that really touched CP in my discussions with him, he said, was how Bill treated him. Here's this Black man who is treating him with respect. And so there was that initial relationship, and then with Anne. And he began to question his entire world. And one thing to remember in all of this, I think that's important, is when we talk about desegregation of schools, segregation in public schools was outlawed 17 years before the Charrette. Nothing had changed. Well, nothing of substance had changed. You can't just have a court ruling and expect that white supremacists are you're going to say, oh, okay, well, we're done with that because it's illegal. There were no sanctions. This was a court ruling. I happened to have been born the same week as Brown v. Board, so I was 17 at the time of the Charrette. And so I thought it was kind of fate that I should work on this book, because it was such a big part of my life as I grew up, knowing about the fallout from that. But it didn't change. for 17 years until people like Bill Riddick, Ann, and CP came along and started making progress. And I remember, Bill, I don't know if you remember this, but in our interviews back then, back in the 90s, when I was first interviewing you, you said that you had 3 goals for the charrette. And one was to ensure that white children and black children could go to the same schools while maintaining the quality of learning in them. The second was to create a dialogue between different parts of the community. And the third goal, you told me, was more abstract. It was to move back, if only by a few inches, the wall that circumscribed the possible. And you told me that that goal was nearly undefinable, its results were unmeasurable, and its lasting effects on Durham would never be known. Well, I think that last part has been shown to be false. The lasting effects are there, but you also told me that, by the way, it was that last unmeasurable, unquantifiable, unknowable goal that most intrigued you. And I think that's so important in understanding your big picture view of all of this. It wasn't solely about schools. It was about what's possible in this world. And one thing that I saw and learned from you is anything's possible that we make happen. And so not to give up and not to be boxed in by ideas of what's supposed to be. And through what you did and what through Ann did, CP did the unimaginable. He not only left the Klan as the leader of the Klan, but he became an anti-racist before that phrase really came into being. And he devoted his life to helping people of all kinds. So sorry for being long-winded on that, but that context of all of this to me was what was the most fascinating and that I wanted to document in the book.
Wow, thank you. So I'm gonna, thank you. I'm gonna open the next question to Mr. Riddick and Ms. Bloom, and kind of circle back on something that you spoke about, Mr. Davidson. I think that most people that lived in Durham at the time of the charrette and the desegregation process would have thought it impossible for CP Ellis and Atwater to work together, let alone become friends. And so I'd like for you to kind of give us a glimpse, Mr. Riddick, into what you saw as that some of the developing points in that relationship.
Well, I think there were 2 things that come to my mind. The first was, excuse me, please, putting them on the same scale, the level. Initially, he thought that Ann and I were going to, kind of, just dismiss him, and that we were going to try to do this thing ourselves. And when that didn't happen, I think he started to get some confidence in what actually was going on. And I believe that there were one thing that really helped the whole process. I can remember one afternoon walking into the Charrette building, the elementary school that we were having it in. And some young men were tearing up his mask and all of that. And Ann didn't see me and CP didn't see me. So I wanted to just kind of peep and see what was going to happen. When she came out and she made them pick the stuff up that they had thrown on the floor, and she put the top back on that hood thing that really bothered her. He was peeping out the door of their office, and it was like magic. Something at that moment happened. and it happened to me too. To see that nobody said a word. She ran the guys off, went back to the office, and nobody spoke about it the rest of the charrette. But it changed it changed the atmosphere, that nobody here is against each other. We are all here to make this place a better place for children to get an education. That's all. That's all the reason we're here. And you can look at what he said in his final speech. If schools can be better, I will tear this card up. And I think I can hook that up to what he saw and do and how he appreciated that.
Thank you. And how about you, Diane? You spent a lot of time interviewing CP and Ann together and separately.
Yeah, well, just like Bill said, when I was interviewing Ann and CP was saying that was a turning point for him. And he said, I went back to the office and I said to her, you're not as bad as I thought you were. You know, so that was like when he saved his things from being torn up. And then they began to talk. So that was like definitely the wall coming down. And then they also talked about how, both of them talked about how then they would sit in their back office as they were preparing for the charrette, and they would talk. And at one point, they were talking about their own children and how, not because of color, but because of poverty, which they were both found themselves in, that their children were being treated really badly at school. Meaning, like if their kids were sick, they'd have to sit in the office and wait for the parent to come get them. Whereas if richer kids were sick, they could be sent home at school. So it was that kind of thing. And she said that, and they both said that at one point they were talking about, you know, how their children and how sad it was for their children, and they cried together. And he said it was the first time he had ever, you know, cried with anyone about that. And that kind of opened up both of their hearts to each other. And it just continued on from there for the rest of their lives, really.
Thank you. Thank you. We actually have a question from our viewing audience that we'll address or try to address right now. Our viewer says, the work of desegregation is ongoing. What are the most important things you see that are urgently needed to get closer to equity? And I'll open that up to anyone who would like to address.
Well, I think the first thing we all going to have to do, and this is a huge problem in this country at this time. There are a lot of things going on that is truly based, I believe, on race and the unwillingness for us to accept each other. So I honestly believe that all of us individually are going to have to take a look in the mirror. And for those of us who are not doing anything, who could be doing something, need to make, I think, an effort to get your own biases out of the way and help somebody else see their biases. And that's not only for the white community. I got friends every day who are very angry. And I'm saying that's not the way we're going to get there. That's not the street we need to take. And I'm sure that some of you have people who see differently. And I think at some point that for folks we really know, really, I play golf with these guys, that every now and then you have to have a serious talk with people close to you. And if everybody would just kind of do that a little bit, I think the country could move ahead toward the goals of being an outstanding United States of America.
Thank you. Mr. Davidson or Ms. Bloom, would you like to chime in?
I guess I'd like to chime in about the value of this story in the kinds of awareness that Bill thinks that we all need to build within ourselves. And when I took the film to 26 film festivals, and it was kind of a simple film, but I felt like it always surprised me what kind of reception that it got. And I felt like people in this country then, and even more so now, we're just hungry for hope, because we look around us and there's just so much to be down about then and now. And as with the dynamics and between races and different people. And I felt like there was so much enthusiasm about it, because even though it was unlikely friendship, that it actually did happen. And it gave people hope that there could be more understanding among people, and that if it happened with them, it could be possible to happen on a wider scale.
Thank you.
Could I add to that?
Sure.
For me, as a journalist, I come at this from also a policy question, from the policy angle, and what can be done. And the personal is obviously clearly important. I agree with that entirely. But as a journalist, I spent the last, from January of 2020 to January of 2021, producing a podcast that examined the issue of reparations at the American Project.us, US. And my mentor for that was Professor William Sandy Darity at Duke University in Durham. And the idea of the wealth gap, confronting the wealth gap, that doesn't have to do specifically with school desegregation, although it does in a lot of ways, because this is a capitalist country, so everything gets down, most things get down to money at some point. The wealth gap is huge in this country. It's not shrinking, and so reparations are needed to close that wealth gap for historical discrimination from slavery on, Jim Crow, redlining, continuing today. So to me, one answer is supporting reparations and supporting the movement for reparations, which is something we all can do by working, telling our elected officials that we support it, and also finding out about it, because I didn't know much about it when I started this. And again, it was a year before that of research into reparations to learn about why it's necessary, how to do it, what the pitfalls are, and how to solve that. So I just wanted to add that plug.
That's great.
So there's work for all of us to do personally, and there's work for all of us to do as members of our community.
Exactly.
And civic engagement as well. So we're going to wrap up our interview. We could talk about this all afternoon. There's lots of great nuggets that we could dig into, but we have limited time. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing your work with us and sharing yourselves with us this afternoon, so that we can bring you to our DPS community. And I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Stevens to wrap up our broadcast.
Thanks again to everyone so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it. One thing I want to do, and my screen is not showing. There we go. One thing I want to do is I want to highlight all of our graduates of 2021 this year. We have graduations currently happening and happening very soon. All of our graduates this year worked in more unique environments than they ever have before. And all of you graduating this year have met the challenges that have been put in front of you. You know, you can survive this. You can survive anything that's ahead of you. And I wish all of you the very, very best of luck on whatever your future endeavors happen to be. I'm like tearing up as I'm saying this because it's such an emotional time. And I also have a graduate who was born and raised here in Durham, just like Heidi and her daughter. And he is graduating this year from Durham Public Schools. So as a mom, I am very grateful for everything Durham Public Schools has done for me as a teacher and for my child. So once again, congratulations to all of our graduates that are coming up. And I skipped one slide. We will not have any live events in June, July, or August for Beyond the Celebrations. We encourage you to join us in September when we will have live events once again. But that doesn't mean we are leaving out the educational fun. We do have some some fun summer opportunities. And Melissa, would you like to tell us a little bit about these?
Sure. So we have something that in Durham Public Schools, that a summer camp, Operation Summer Learning, that we are offering to students this year that we're very excited about. So you can feel free to check out that bit.ly that you see there on the screen. It's bit.ly/DPS Summer Learning 2021 to find out all kinds of information about our amazing summer camps that we have planned for DPS students. And another opportunity that we have here in Durham is Explore Durham. And you can find more information about that at bit.ly/Explore Durham. And what Explore Durham is offering are different weekly themes and activities around those each week. So they change each week. They're quite varied throughout the summer. So we encourage you to take advantage of both of these wonderful summer fun opportunities that we have here in Durham and our summer learning camp through Durham Public Schools. And here to wrap us up, we have Executive Director, Ms. Chanel Sidberry.
Thank you, Ms. Perez, and thank you to our wonderful guests, Mr. Riddick, Mr. Davidson, and Mrs. Bloom. It was a pleasure to have you to speak with us today and to celebrate this monumentous occasion that is going to be coming up here shortly. I want to remind all of our viewers that we are on social media. You can connect with us via the handles at Twitter, Instagram, and also Facebook. And just want to have a couple of encouraging moments here at the end. I just want to remind everyone, this was only 50 years ago. This work happened only 50 years ago. So that lets you know that the work of desegregation, it is ongoing and continuous, just as one of our viewers put in terms of their questions there. I think that there was an important message that came from our guest, Mr. Riddick, that says we are all here to make this better for children. And I think that could be on a logo on a t-shirt that we all should wear. Here in Durham Public Schools, we're here for the children. We are here to make things better. And poverty seems to be that common thread that we have to keep our eye on and combat the inequities there. I just want to lift up a couple of the ways that Durham Public Schools is promoting this work of desegregation and equity across the common threads that we have in Durham Public Schools. Number one is our DPS strategic plan. Under the leadership of Dr. Pascal Mabinga, Durham has adopted our strategic plan, and throughout that strategic plan, you're going to see equity threads woven throughout so that we make sure that the work that we do, both in the classroom, outside of the classroom, and the fiscal responsibilities, that we have an equity lens as we do that work. I also want to shout out the Office of Equity Affairs under the leadership of Dr. Daniel Kelvin Bullock. We do have an equity policy that is coming forth that is going to help us govern ourselves and make sure we keep the main thing, and that we keep pondering that question. Who are the children that are farthest from justice, and what must we do to get equity and access for them? So I want to shout out the Office of Equity Affairs. I also want to shout out the work of Student Support Services under the leadership of Dr. Laverne Maddox Perry. We have lots of work that is happening in terms of counseling, mental health support, social work, having lots of food drives, and also having lots of opportunities for our families so that they can get support. So we are thinking about the whole child in Durham Public Schools. In terms of the curriculum that we bring forth, we are decolonizing the curriculum with the leadership of curriculum and instruction to make sure that we have an equity lens in the materials that our children get in their hands and the activities that they participate in. It's very clear that we have to be strategic about making sure that students see themselves in the pages of the books and in the resources that we bring forth. And then last but not least, I want to shout out our Public Affairs Office. We have Mr. Truitt on the call with us today, and also under the leadership of Mr. Chip Setterworth. They continue to get the message out about these opportunities for our families. the work of desegregation continues to thrive and continues to move on. Just a couple of quick stats about Durham Public Schools. So 74% of our schools serve populations where 75% of the students are students of color, and 94% of Durham Public Schools, they serve students that have over 50% of students that are students of color. And in general, if you look at Durham Public Schools in comparison to the 70s, we have a smaller percentage of white students enrolled in Durham City schools, in Durham Public Schools, than we did in Durham City schools in the 70s. And so we have to ponder, why is that? Why is that happening? And we want to make sure that Durham Public Schools is inclusive of all cultures, all socioeconomic statuses, all people. And so we want to continue to reflect on that. Although we are primarily an urban school district of color, we welcome all families and all students under our umbrella of Durham Public Schools. We see all students in Durham Public Schools, and we know that this work continues. I want to encourage you again to tag us on social media to win a free copy of the Best of Enemies book, or the Unlikely Friendship DVD, which is the documentary that chronicles the life of the events that led us to the desegregation of Durham Public Schools. I'm going to ask our special guest to join us one more time. So Mr. Riddick, Mr. Davison, and Mrs. Bloom, if you would join us one more time. I just want to thank you again. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your work, for your courage, for speaking out about this work. It is important that the residents of Durham know this history and know that it is ongoing, and that we can continue this conversation of equity and access, not just around the skin color, but also around that poverty line as well, which is the equalizer for all students, whether or not we have the haves or the have-nots. It is a continuous conversation, and we strive for that work, but we thank you for the groundwork that you have all individually done, and the collective work that you have done to move this work forward for Durham Public Schools. So thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for the invitation. Congratulations to the seniors.
For sure.
Awesome. So thank you again. We thank you for joining us. We'll see you again in September. Please make sure you go to our website, dpsnc.net, to learn more information about our cultural events and also our summer programs. And don't forget to follow us on social media and tag us to win a free DVD or a free book. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day.